So let me start from the beginning. This is basically strategies to incorporate stakeholders and community members in the research process. And some of it, it's going to be participatory. And I think what it stemmed from was one of the things that Alpha said was a lot of times people are tired of being surveyed. But I think if they have some skin in the game and the results are shared with them, they're more likely to participate in different types of engagement, such as what you're getting ready to have, Kiela. And so last time we talked, two sessions before this, we talked about why do it in terms of community engagement. And those in green were reasons that we expanded on and that were identified in the NEA research agenda. And I think we talked about other reasons, and some of the other reasons are the reasons basically are civic engagement. You get buy-in, you get different opinion, and over time, you will find those who are interested, and they have different knowledge that you may not have and different perspectives. So you're getting different types of perspectives. And in terms of greater social cohesion, it's just basically, they listed all in there, but it's just basically contribution to the public discourse, and there's more involvement with it. And just that type of stuff. And we talked about it. Get it. And then other reasons, grants required to document need and support investment. And I think you're better able to serve and address community needs. Are there other thoughts that you all have as to why you do it? I think in terms of just coming up with a plan, it just 3 heads are better than 1. So are there any other reasons that you might add to that?
Also, like with the community, it makes them, of course, have a buy-in to express themselves and their concerns. I always, think of that. They're going to complain sometimes and most of the times, but then give them a feeling of ownership, a sense of ownership for what's going on in their community.
And that would be, I think, contribution to the public discourse, in terms of just involving them in that process.
I would build on that to say that if, and this is a caveat, if that input is included and taken seriously in the continued planning, then it gives them ownership and participation in a planning process that impacts
right. And to piggyback on Kiela, also sometimes it seems that the plan is presented when it's actually really the developers or whoever it is that's implementing the project may have already decided how and when they're going to do it. So that's always like concern.
Yeah. but it's presented as we want community feedback, where really it's more just an obligatory sort of requirement.
Yeah.
But also I think that another reason is that if they have some thoughts and the developer has some thoughts, then I think you get a chance to problem solve and figure out how their ideas might be incorporated or why it might not work, but as long as they've been included in that process and it was given thorough consideration.
I think only if that's why I made that caveat, only if it's done in advance of the developer or the whoever the person or organization is, only if it's done early enough in advance. Because to what Rhonda's saying, a lot of times it's done almost patronizingly, but presented as community engagement, like listening, but they're not really listening because they already decided.
So how can you Well, and we're gonna, and there's a graph later in terms of how you build trust, because I think that's crucial to any community engagement. And so if I look at, does anybody else have anything to add before I move forward?
Sorry, looking at it from a participant point of view, why would I be motivated to go participate in this discussion? I want something out of it. I want, my voice heard where other engagements don't listen, or I want to know what's going on, but I also am, I think it takes a lot of courage to attend community meetings and voice opinions that are not always supportive of the agenda, or, it's an opportunity to critique the system, but it's also an opportunity to participate in changing it. So from the audience end of it, it may be a way to be less alone, to fight off depression, or, find, and this comes under social cohesion, but I think it's less top down from what the guys get out of it, and bottom up, what do I get for, I get to meet my neighbors, I get to, volunteer or connect services, or, find out some information about, a job possibility or a school situation, or what else? Training opportunities, a new job.
What are some of the ways that you think that could be facilitated and built into that process? Because sometimes I think there's open discussion.
Right.
There might be some coalition building in terms of subgroup support. I'm just curious as to what are some of the ways you feel that can be built?
One of the best ways is breaking down into small groups, no more than 5 people, asking them specific questions. And it could be a round robin, it could be it could be different questions for different tables. But a lot of folks feel more comfortable talking out loud when it's a small group, and there's no risk of failure there. And then there's some folks who don't respond to written directions, but they're perfectly fine verbally. And it's also nice in the sense that you're forced into a group with neighbors, not the friends you brought, and you get to meet new people and you hear different perspectives. And so there's a more relaxed kind of sharing of information.
And then some of the ways I've done it with smaller groups is break them up into twos, and they feel comfortable because they build rapport with each other, and then they can play the devil's advocate with each other. And whether it's the round robins of 5 or 2, then they report out and build on that. And that a lot of, and they report out, so they're comfortable because it's not necessarily theirs or and other ways, tactics is, what would your neighbors think if they were here? What might be some of the other thoughts that are going around in the community? Mm-hmm. That gives them permission to share and not necessarily take ownership of it, but give some diverse opinions.
Right. There's real energy in group brainstorming. It's like you don't come fully formed with reactions and ideas, et cetera, but you feed off of each other.
And then sometimes, I'm jumping ahead, but sometimes in terms of what works is if you've got several scenarios, and then they can critique it and build on it, because sometimes I've found that, especially when I do new product work or that type of thing, it's hard for people to start, but if you throw an idea, they can always improve it, critique it, and then build on it. And so sometimes that's a helpful strategy to get it going, because it's not set in place. But then I think sometimes it's easy for people to criticize and correct than to create a whole new idea.
Right.
So kind of, are you suggesting like even just a prompt, like to get people's mind going?
Prompt to get going, or just say, this is a concept we came up with.
Mhm.
What works, what doesn't work, how would you improve it, and why doesn't it work?
I was thinking even sometimes you'll have a pre-session with maybe strategic people that would set maybe 5 points and that pre-session would then identify specific areas that need to be discussed in the bigger group.
Okay, but
Sometimes that helps, so that people, when they see that, they may still go off and they may add another category, but sometimes doing a pre-group will help if you need it to narrow down, what you want, so that it's not like, all over the place. So,
but I think, yeah. And so I just, that flows into in terms of the steps as what you might take. And I think it's a continuous loop. It's not, you might identify the issue and project in terms of what's your problem to solve, what are you trying to create or build, and identify objectives and hypotheses. Then I think it's important to define community and stakeholders. And who exactly are you defining as a community? Who do you want to get in touch? Are they the people in the schools? Are they the PTOs? And sometimes it's best to start with some established groups and then have those stakeholders branch out and bring in some other people. But I think that's key to reach as many people with as diverse opinions that all have something to do with whatever your community be it the artist community, be it the business community, be it constituents or patrons. Then I think it's important, and I just listed these steps out in terms of to visit and learn, meet and identify, go, and that's sort of like what you said, Ron, to go meet and identify community leaders, members and stakeholders, just go to events, reassess project, just listen and observe as to what some of the problems are, what some of the challenges are, and what some of the opportunities are. And it's, and this, a lot of times it's a continuous loop as to, in terms of refining it, defining it, and just going back. And so that's one of the ways. And then I think, go on, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna pipe in, because like the reason I, brought that up is it was on the heels of attending another placemaking cafe where the people on there are what do you call it, cultural bearers that were on there. We're talking about how they're so over all this data-driven evaluations and surveys, and when people show up, and these things are always mandated by the National Endowment for the Arts. And then, this whole thing on collecting data, and for organizations, they couldn't, they were so caught up in the data, what do you call it, the cultural data plans for every state, every city, the arts councils, the arts commissions, they're always asking for all this data because they're data driven and then now they're asking impact, right? But before it was this whole thing on data collection. And so we are inundated with all of these surveys, like that's why I posted the Chicago census. How many people really had time to do 2 hours later, of that kind of data that they're collecting? And then again, what are we going to do with that data afterwards? I know that over here in this community, or even communities that I started engaging with as an artist coming into community, for instance, Garfield Park conservatory when the LIST program was over there, and they were engaging stakeholders in the community from different sectors of the community. And it wasn't necessarily arts, but we formed a task force in the arts so we could talk about those issues. A lot of artists that are community people that are not community leaders dread showing up at those meetings because they get lost in the verbiage, you know, and the presentations, and it's very intimidating, you know, for people to show up for these kinds of meetings where they want all this community feedback and stuff, you know, and then at the end of their programming, they have to come up with all of the data that substantiates the kind of programming that if it was successful or if it made an impact. And those are things that are important. But sometimes the community is so over that, where it's data driven. But other ways of engaging the public is like tactical urbanism, where you're asking questions as the project unfolds, and then you're assessing, you know, how it's going without having to have this data sheet of check marks or asking people to input, you know. So that's kind of why I brought it up, because I think of us being cultural bearers and out there with the people we service or we serve, we have to find better ways of kind of getting information from them, because we have to report back the impact that our work is really doing on community.
And I'm gonna give just an example of a library that's near me, but I visit. It's not the library that's mine. They've been effective, like say, for instance, they're doing space design. They do small surveys that might take, and the Park District does too, that might take 5 minutes. And they show you the options that they're thinking of. And it takes no more than 5 minutes, and they explain it. They show the cost impact. And they ask what your priority, you know, what you like about it, what you don't like about it. And they tend to get really, you know, if you get 500 surveys, even though you may send it out to all your constituents, that's a pretty good, that's statistically significant generally if you get those 500 responses from a community. But the way that they've been effective is you might do this in terms of identifying the problem, and there of assessing it, you just might send out small bits. Like if you're redesigning the, one thing we did was send out in terms of what are your priorities. We got those priorities from a session with the Board of Trustees and the staff and the employees, and then just had them rank order it. And so we got a pretty good response from that. And then you generally build on it. But when you're getting individuals' feedback, a lot of times it depends on who your audience is. If you're defining stakeholders and community members, I think you want them to be part of the planning and the problem. I think when you get into the survey method, you've already done quite a bit of work to see what the public or who your audience's priority. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And
How much is acceptable, would you say, for the funders for data for non-traditional collection or non-traditional engagement? Because I say that to Alpha's point. One of the things that I've submitted a few proposals for is to do what Laura and I call formal and informal community engagement, where say artists go out and hit the streets, they go to the bus stops, they go to the you know, what do you call it, laundromats, they go to the street corners and engage with people to get feedback, even if it is a survey or a QR code or something. I don't know if that's something.
Are you talking about, okay, are you talking about more qualitative, where you might just do video clips? Because I've done video clips on Zoom in terms of, I might do focus groups with about 50 people, 10, 5 groups. But then from those focus groups, and it may be focus groups or it may be bulletin board, where you're getting so much, and bulletin boards are, and I'll describe it. What it might be is it's a 3-day, you convene these people for 3 days. And a lot of times you'll put a topic up and then they will answer, and it's all written, so it's at their time. And sometimes you'll open it up to, so other participants can see their responses and then respond to the other participants. And And then after that whole process is over, you get a whole bunch of data, but it tends to be qualitative. Then after that, we end up doing, probably taking 10 of those 50 people and doing 1 hour interviews that are videoed. And that tends to be adequate, but those are big projects for people, you know, with money. So it depends on if you're doing quantitative or qualitative. Say, for instance, if you're looking at, for your artist design the future, for qualitative, in terms of actual interviews, you would have the same interview, the same questionnaire, but you might do subsets of 5 artists, you know, that are in the area. You might do 5 businesses if one of the goals is to bring, it depends on who your community and your stakeholders are. So I'm not answering your question, but generally surveys of 100 per segment is what's quantitatively significant, but it depends on how big the audience is. And that's mainly for big community surveys, like for fundraisers, or 500. 500 is a really good number, but you're not segmenting those because it generally be 500 per group. So that depends on how big. I don't know if I'm answering your question, because that, if you had like 100, I think, and you went out to the community, that would be good, but you need to have the same tool that you're using so that you can differentiate.
Right. And that was kind of the thought in my mind, like whatever tool we'd be using in the more traditional, formal sort of way, we'd take that same tool, but just out to the streets, literally, and get people, somebody sitting at the bus stop. Hey, could you, you know, even if it is a survey. But I think to Alpha's point, like, people not only are intimidated by coming to these meetings and not feeling heard and all the things that go with that, but they also don't feel like folks meet them where they are. In a literal sense, you know, hey, I got to go to work. I got kids. I got to do laundry. I got to go grocery shopping. You know, come walk with me instead of always asking me to walk with you.
Where else you could go? Because I know that my son got a job after this one, a real job. At one time he was doing surveys for the CTA, riding the bus, or you riding the train. So they're on you got a captive audience, but you don't have any controls. That might be kind of crazy now, but he got a job after that one, you know, because of the individuals he encountered. But that would be one example of where you might go.
Okay.
And ways to get them is like at the Metro, yeah. And I know that we did some stuff at the Metro, but what happens is it depends on if it's broke or not. You don't fix it, and it depends on what you're evaluating or testing. So like Alpha, I think you were doing the satisfaction of your programs when you were out in Sacramento, correct? In terms of what you had set up?
Right.
And so if you've got people that are there and they're eating and they're doing the program, what you give the reason why we do it is we need to sustain it, continue funding it, and we need your input. And you just tell them the truth and what can make it better, what's working and what's not. And if you can just take 5 minutes, we would appreciate it. And you might have to do, depending on the age population, paper, because some people are more comfortable writing it with paper as opposed to with the tablet. And then
Well, that's interesting that you would say that, because I was going around and around and around in circles with the administrative assistant of the museum, because she was saying that her population that she works with are seniors, and they are not trying to add anything into the database on the laptops or the books, you know, you know, like the pro books that they had there at the table to sign people up that came to the event. And I'm always saying, where were the surveys? Where were the evaluations? Did you have them on the table? You know, we moved everything over online as well to take surveys, so it's automatic, or the docents, you know, could take the information in. But she was so adamant about the populations they serve, which were senior citizens that came through there, were not going to do this survey online. But it was more complicated for her to do it, or to actually take all those surveys, put them in a binder by zip code and old school, right? So that they have a hard copy, they have all, you know, what city these people are from, now the administrative assistant, which is a senior from one of the senior programs that was placed there, you know, and funded to be there, has to take all that information and put it online. When they could have just did it, then when they could, I felt they could have just put it in, took the quick, you know, the pro book, take the survey right then and there and go on, you know, but it just became this long process, you know, and then the back end of the process, you know, of consolidating all of this information into one report, when we know you can just go to the survey online and then just do it and it'll tally up everything so that we can get the reports done, you know. So it was just this vicious circle, and we just pushed back. You know, me and the other consultant, we just had to push back because they're not getting the reason why it's important to have these surveys, but it's about the way you engage the people that are coming in order to get them to take the surveys. We have to find a better way to do that, because people are, again, so over having to do this when they come to the events.
Well, you
But-
tell them what's in it for them. And if they are enjoying this program, it would be helpful to have their opinion. I mean, you just have to be straight
Well,
up.
what has happened because of the reluctancy of people doing this is that the city of Sacramento pulled the funding from the pop-ups that had $1.3 million in it, because they said they were underperforming, because people are not, again, doing the data that they need to sustain or to quantify that this program needs to continue. And the certain program that I'm talking about is one of the pop-ups. They have the program where they have catering and they serve seniors. They deliver meals, you know, in the evening on that Friday, and the seniors look, for the last 2 years since the pandemic, look forward to having those Friday meals, and they were delivered by the youth, you know, that attended the program, that had driver's license, et cetera, were able to, you know, go and deliver the meals, and they had this, you know, interaction with someone, and the whole thing of, oh, they're going to come today, and, you know, all that, you know, what's on the menu, you know. And so now, because of the reluctancy of people wanting to do what was asked, they cut the program. Not only that reason, but pretty much, if you can't, you know, justify and show proof of how you're spending this money, and the population is being serviced with this money, and meaning in the teens taking surveys, even mean videotaping, anecdotal, kind of like them telling you how they like the program, and really, really, you know, pushing your program, you're going to get it pulled. And the city pulled the money from the Sierra Health Foundation. So over 60 organizations lost funding. And the money was taken back to the city so it could be moved over to youth workforce development. So people that got the contracts for youth development, you know, for the summer, they're going to have to really stay on top of these evaluations, really stay on top of submitting things in a timely manner so they can retain the funding, because they just lost $1.3 million because they didn't do these processes. And that's what they said in the, you know, community meeting, when everybody was up in arms about, we thought we were going to get this money, we thought we were stable. And they just said, you were not reporting, you were not evaluating, you were not turning in the surveys, you were not showing that your programs are active.
Did you train the students that were delivering it to do a quick survey with them? Because they should have had a trust if they see the same constituents every day.
Well, what they didn't do, this program, how it affected the Sojourner Truth Museum, is that they sort of set it up differently in terms of impact and numbers. They didn't say they were going to do 100, 200 people a week and all these numbers. They said how they were going to do their programming with their pop-up. So it's built in, you know, and that, yes, they had docents or young people that were partnered with the seniors, even with them getting a lot of money for computers that they were able to buy for the seniors. They had the young people teaching them or doing tech support for Zoom meetings, how to log on, how to create these things, you know, things like that. And so it was all built in. the Sojourner Truth can prove, and they can show the documentation that was, gleaned from this project. But a lot of others, I said 60 organizations that weren't kind of doing this data-driven stuff. And when it came down to it, the city said, we're pulling this money from the Sierra Health Foundation that was the administrator of the funding, and putting it back in the city budget to align it with workforce development. And if you want to apply for money in the fall, this program will be available through the city of Sacramento, but it will no longer be, by the administrative agency that was doling out the money. And who got caught in the crossfire? Of course, the organizations that were doing programming, and again, a loss of funding in the arts. So that's why it's so important, I know, to do this, but we have to figure out ways to make it more friendly when we're gathering this data, so that people are not just so turned off they don't even do it.
Yeah, that really does have to be thought out and included in some kind of programming. Like the seniors were coming, and so you had sort of a captive audience there. Excuse me.
Yeah, but the failed place here is the administrative assistant that wanted to do it her way in gathering data, and not the way that the consultants were recommending for her to gather the data. Was the breakdown, some of the breakdowns but knowing the population of the seniors that weren't trying to do all that,
Right.
and so we know what has to be built into the programming to make things more friendly, and not as intimidating as going online and trying to figure out these surveys and trying to see the screen and trying to do all these other things that we do. So I'm just saying, I know that it's very important to collect data, to have the data, but people are just, I'm going to continue to say that, so over data collection, especially, people that are not only the people that are executing the surveys or handing them out to people, but gathering it and then getting people to respond to.
Did you have money for an incentive? Because I was at DePaul and the art museum, and I could either do it online or I could do it paper. Well, I couldn't get a wireless connection. I know I would never do it, but their incentive was a $5 Amazon gift card. The Museum of Science and Industry, had someone taken there, and they would immediately send you the $5 Amazon gift card. And I don't know if you had money for incentives, but the $5 gift card got quite a few people taking those surveys.
$5 incentivized people?
Yeah, it was a $5 Amazon card.
It's a $5 incentive, but people, for where I'm talking about, people don't even want to pay to come into the museum, which is only $4.50, and then take a survey. But we turn around and give them $5. It's like, but I hear you, and I agree that there shouldn't be, that it could be whatever incentives that we put in place. This week we're doing here in Brownsville Art District, we're doing the trolley tour, and that's an excellent place to survey or take, not survey, but have people talk about their experiences, the docents that are on the double-decker buses. They can, record those comments or, engage people, in small groups, that are riding the trolley, that get off at the other museums and record their experiences.
As long as you have them sign a release.
Well, I think, okay, that's.
You need to have them sign a release, and tell them how you're going to use it and why you're going to use it. It could just be while they're waiting in line for the trolley, but I would make sure that I had a release with that data, just like you do that release that you're recording this. Is this okay? You're in.
As long as it's posted.
Yep, as long as.
And I think also on Eventbrite and all the other information that goes out, they know that they're going to be photographed and recorded when they attend. And I agree, because the University of Illinois will be here setting up a table, and they usually are good at those surveys or talking to people and having those, like I said, release forms.
and I'm sorry, I think we've kind of interrupted your flow, Lisa,
Go ahead.
but I feel like this is important conversation. I know for ourselves, we have to use the terminology that the funders want, data and surveys, or, you know, whatever way we define that. But I think maybe there's some value in thinking about other terminology, other descriptions, other ways to frame what we're asking of the community. Not to try and fool anybody, but just to like bring a fresh kind of way for them to receive the idea even of what it is. It's like, because like Alpha said, they hear survey, they hear data, they hear, you know, all those, that terminology we have to use from our end. But I don't know if you've ever encountered that.
I generally, and they're getting paid for groups, but I know that, you know, with the library, it's just, we're trying to make, you know, we're in the middle of doing a strategic plan, and we need your input. You just say, we need, you know, I just say, we just want to make things better. And we know it's not perfect. So, and you have to have some open-ended questions, which are hard, which take a lot of time in terms of to actually tabulate. But as long as you've got a couple open ends and keep it short and just really easy to do, I think you get a better response. I would limit it to about 2 pages, and that would be it. 10 questions. You got to keep the survey short, and a lot of times the demographics are put toward the end, but they're just check marks. So I don't really mind putting the, you know, putting the demographic data, and I always have the option of not putting it, you know, to leave it blank. Especially the income one, yeah, in terms of a lot of people are suspicious of that. But I just always just say, we, you know, you've benefited from the program, and we would like to continue to receive the funding. They understand that nothing's free. And sometimes you just have to be real direct, not, you know, survey or whatever, but we just need your feedback. And give them a couple of ways to do it. You know, the paper, the online, or they might, you know, you might have somebody there with a camera and just say, yeah, if you want to tell us what you're feeling, would it be possible to videotape you to get your thoughts? Because some people may be uncomfortable, you know, be comfortable saying it in terms of hitting it the different ways that you know, people are, that you can, because I know sometimes people won't talk a lot, but they'll write stuff down, whereas others are more comfortable talking.
I wonder if even you saying that made me think, at least for the set that is comfortable using their phone, where you were saying video, even to request people make a video and just send it or upload it or have a link for them to share it.
Yeah, because I know that there was one service that Trinity Church of God in Christ, and it's some Black firm that they use to do video, to do surveys, but they do it all through video. I mean, I'm sure it's expensive and they're out of DC, but it's all video and it's really easy to do.
Well, there's also, because I'm thinking just kind of the technology of it, that if we did video, there's a service called otter.ai, which transcribes all of what is said in the video. It can do real time, or it can do, you know, you just upload it and it makes it all written.
But I think that's easier with younger.
Well, people who, that's why I say people who have a facility with their phone. Like, I'm not younger per se, but I feel comfortable with my phone. But we know young folks are gonna feel fine doing that.
And younger, I mean, is probably 65 and up, 65 and younger.
And younger.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was listening to.
I hear you, Lisa.
I was listening to the California Museum Association, the museum, Sacramento Museum Association, and they had a presentation that I thought was really interesting. And this is how they were getting their numbers, and they were dealing with their surveys. And they were dealing with TikTok. And I know that since we're talking about young people and what they do, but they were looking at the change in the way their evaluations went out with those little TikTok, shorties, and how people responded to them. And that's when they could set in the surveys. It was a really interesting topic, and they had presented it at the National Museum Association conference that was held in Boston this year. And then they came back and shared it with the local group in Sacramento. But I really thought it was interesting, other ways of grabbing information, and it's how people load up these TikToks when they come to your event, or their shorties when they come to your event, and they go straight to TikTok, and then you can cross-pollinate them to other platforms. Even Facebook has those, and YouTube even has those little, shorties that are on there, and getting information, and it's good ways to ask questions. But I mean, I asked that question earlier, these are different ways, that we are looking at, gathering data, but then again, it's the backstory on how you process that data in one location, and what you do with it afterwards, especially if you're moving from one modality or methodology to the other.
And I know that I was at Northwestern yesterday, and they sent me a text with a link to the survey, and it was easy because it was like 3-4 questions.
Mm-hmm.
But that goes in, that gets online, and so that's another way of getting your online. But you got to have their cell phone number. And a lot of times people only have a cell phone number now.
Right.
Yeah.
You would have to ask them for their permission to do that, though, in terms of.
Always. I think that's what we said in that release form, but
Yeah.
It'll be a verbal release form, or release form, they just push the button before they start the survey? What do you think? Attached to a survey?
I said, if it's a survey, you would have to let them know that you're going to use their phone number, that you may use it to send out information. I think you'd need to let them know so that they don't get upset. Well, I don't know if people get upset. Some people get upset over little stuff, so it depends in terms of that.
Opt-in sort of.
Yeah,
concept.
opt-in
Yeah.
is okay if we send you survey, information about our other programs and that kind of thing. And
The other survey that I think is real convenient is that COVID-19. I don't know if you guys, when you did your first test and they gave you a little paper and they'll say, did you want to us to check on you? And some people say, I don't need them to follow me. I said yes. And periodically I get text messages from the Center for Disease Control asking me how I'm doing. Be safe. And then the questions are not where I have to ask all these questions, but I know it's going into a national database, you know what I mean? And they're collecting data, asking me how I feel. How do you feel?
I get that like about 3 times a week. I'm in 2 studies. I'm in a whole bunch of studies, but that's what I get from, and this one's out of Boston. And I think they were finding a way to, and then I'm in another study hub, but they send messages, and I'm not getting paid anything for the one for Boston, but I'm just curious about stuff. So a lot of people, and so it's easy in terms of what are your symptoms today? Did you have a temperature? Is this correct in terms of your method? Because so many people now are self-testing that they don't know how many people really have COVID, and a whole bunch of people right now have whatever strand is going on. But yeah, I think that's a good way, but that's an ongoing kind of assessment, because I'm getting like 2 or 3 times a week, and that's too much data, but they're only looking for anomalies, or basically trying to figure out how many people have COVID based on that.
What I was saying about that was I like the way the survey, and I'll take it because it's quick and to the point. I don't have to go through a lot of steps to push the button and say, and then thank you.
Yeah. It's just 3 questions. It's just 3 questions. So in terms of making your survey simpler to get at the essential data, I think that's a key, but 3 questions is going to be not enough, because you need probably some demographic data, don't you, Alpha?
Yeah, mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as long as it's short, I don't mind. And if you can just check it off, it's fine. And then I thought, Kiela, you know, just doing the audio, if they had some other thoughts and have it transcribed, was a wonderful solution, because you probably get far more information if they can just, you know, say it as opposed to having to type it for some people. Okay. And I think this is a circular, it's round the clock. So I think you all pretty analyze results and findings, take action. But after you analyze the results and take action, one of the things that's important is, and that's what I think you all have talked about earlier, is how do you keep the conversation going? You know, you partner and you collaborate, you might break up into small groups. You look for opportunities to share findings with community stakeholders, and you ask for feedback on the results. Does this seem, are we missing something? I think you keep the conversation going, just to think it's a one-time thing. I think it's important that when you share those findings and have opportunities for feedback, it's key. And then always reassess the information and data needs, and then just be consistent in the frequency and the collection and just the communication of those results. You might, you know, in terms of sharing it and making it available. Any thoughts on that one, or anything that I'm missing in terms of keeping that conversation going?
I think you make some really good points. And just from a user's point of view, you know, your mission and purpose for collecting data, you got to be as transparent as possible and how it's getting used. And so, you know, if you on one occasion, we collaborated, the alderman wanted to help us because he liked the project, but asking people questions coming from the alderman's office put everybody off, because it's like, who's using this information? No way. It's, you know, so it was like, well, okay, alderman, you can sponsor when we roll out the data, and, you know, you can sponsor that event. But, and again, everybody kind of showed up with their suspicions. Who's using this information? Is it going to get used against me? So that was a big issue, I would say. It's not a reason not to survey or collect data. It's just who it's coming from and why. Where is it going?
And how it's going to be used.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's just one thing, but here's something, and what this looks at, and it's from, it's a public health, but I think it's important, and I think it's relevant in terms of how you build trust in partnership building, and the source is down there. But I think it's, you know, what are some of the factors affecting trust building? And this is in the medical area, but a lot of times I think this holds forth in the community area. And it's, you know, just pre-existing community mistrust of resources, pre-existing community governance resources, and this is for healthcare, but it's in terms of looking at the morbidity and mortality rates. And then these are, I thought, real important in terms of just the stages of building trust and what sort of happens along the way. And I think essentially what it is that it's a slow process, and you build it over time, and you're going to have some conflict. You're going to, you know, and how you resolve it is key. And you're going to have some people that will never trust you. But I think the level of commitment to working out differences, the skill in resolving disputes and conflict, and continuing maintenance of trust over time, I think are key variables. And I just thought it was an interesting way of just showing what that timeline is and what happens over time. And I put the source of that because it's an article in terms of, I think I'd done a search in terms of a realist, and it's based on a study, BMC Public Health, a realist evaluation of community-based participatory research, partnership, synergy, and trust building and related ripple effects. And it came from that study, but I thought it was a good way, and that study is cited there, of just showing and just curious about.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah,
Are these slides gonna be available to us or no?
yeah, they're available.
Okay, because that link there, there
Yeah.
ain't no way I'm gonna type all of that.
Well, no, wait a minute. It's here. I'll put it in the chat. Let's see if I can do it in the chat. Wait a minute. I can't. And I do. And the next step would, but yeah, it will be made. But wait a minute. I'm going ahead. Wait a minute. But yeah, I should cite. But then, yeah, but I don't know how to get it off of this thing and do it because I'm in that. But yeah, it'll be, you'll have access to it.
Yeah, I'll type it in.
Yeah. And then what are some of the strategies that you all have used to build trust? And you talked about transparency.
Mhm.
I think Laura talked about it in Kayla. What are some of the other strategies that you've used to build trust that you think in terms of getting the cooperation? And one of the things I think, Rhonda, that you said earlier was, the product is not done and that they truly have some input into it.
Right.
As opposed to being a
Some
done
things, yeah, I've done is like become a member of some of their groups. And I know that's if you're involved with a long range, like I work for different communities. So I was able to build trust by attending some of their events. Basically that, being conscious of where I would give the presentations. It'd have to be someplace that they were comfortable in coming. So with working for the university, a lot of people may not be comfortable with coming to my facility. So I would have to go out, in churches, was one of the main things, schools, PTA meetings. So being involved on the local level with a targeted community was a way to build trust.
And then some of the other suggestions they had is if you are doing a big enough research project to train some of your employees that might be working in the community center, which is what you did, or train some of the community members. And I think that's one of the things Kayla said, to actually conduct the research. So they speak their language, but you've got a systematic way, to get that input, but just basically using the people that live within the community and that they are involved with. Like if you're doing youth, have some youth that might co-work with a researcher, but let the youth take the lead so that he or she has a backup in case she runs into, in terms of just changing it up. And I think also to sort of be flexible in terms of if something's not working, figure out a way to shift it, and then just ask for their participation and their commitment. Are there other strategies that you all have used to build trust when you think of some of the communities you worked with or groups?
Sorry, go ahead. Well, we worked with some local teachers in a summer program with pre-adolescent or teens, young teens. And it was creative writing, but using the computer and learning interview skills and having them work with seniors and collect stories. And so they would learn how to ask questions and how to record their responses, and then they transcribe it when they got back. So there was a lot of kind of computer literacy and creative writing that they were learning, and they worked in teams, so they learned from each other. Oh, the thing that we shared it with the community was we took photographs, published stories, and had a booklet at the end of it. It was all about gentrification and a proposed bike trail and how did people feel about that, and collecting a history of the community.
Did you do a case study on that? Because it sounds like a wonderful project in terms of all the things that were included in that.
No, I've never done a case study on that. I should.
Because you've involved, I mean, you've done lots of things that made it work. you know.
Right, yeah. And it was a collaboration with the teacher. She was the inventive one. But the fact that we housed it and we were kind of the community, the respected community leader. So it was a way to engage with, church. So we were geographically active and everybody knew us. So it wasn't like the kids were cold calling people knocking on the door.
Mhm.
Well, I think the context of the desired input, like the group, affects it a lot also. So like a lot of the large scale collaborative community-based murals that I've done
Mhm.
were for specific sites or neighborhoods. So it made it easier to reach out. In sometimes, let's say if it was a school, it's kind of a hyper local environment. You can just send home notes to all the families. You can engage them to come to some sort of session where they give input. And what we've done from the artistic side is get people to draw, get them to write their ideas down in a fun kind of creative way. And then we actually use those to craft the final product and then invite those people back to help create it. That's one example. But another was same for a mural. We wanted community participation, but we did a really what I consider grassroots, and we made flyers about community paint days, about design days, about give your input days. So I just did that in backwards order, but and we had a small group of community residents, and we literally went to there was a lot of apartment buildings in this area, and we literally just rang doorbells and knocked on doors and said, "Hi, we're doing this project. We'd love to have you come out." I mean, that's an ideal scenario, but to me, it's akin to going to the grocery store, the bus stop, the laundromat, the street corner, to meet folks where they are. So that, I think, just the action of doing that and then showing them or inviting them back to see how input has been used is powerful, as opposed to like what Laura was saying, you just never know where it's going to go, who's going to use it, what it's for.
So those are wonderful examples. And they got to see how the information was being used. Did you invite so the seniors got the book with Laura's example that was published, is that correct?
Yeah, they published enough books to go to everybody. So all of the interviewees as well as community folks. So it was, it's like a little magazine, lots of pictures, little stories. It was very effective. We could have built on it. We could have done more. We could have had a website and it would be archived, It kind of disappears in the mist.
But it also was an effective way to document the gentrification process. What did you want that book to do? What was the
purpose of it? The lead organization was the folks doing the planning for the trail. And so there was a lot of fearful discussions about, gang kids, shooting out your windows. And so it was a way to connect young people and the old timers and talking about, changes over time. And so it made the discussion about gentrification not one of fear, but, change can be good. It can be, you know, there's a lot to be learned here. So it opened up the discussion.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? And then I'm just going to do a slide that I probably need to cite the source because I just pulled it. But these are just ways to build trust. And I think you all have talked about quite a few of them. And you've got it there. And so that's how I'm just going to close it out. If anybody has anything else. And that's for personal as well as I think for organizational. So I think it was written from a personal standpoint, but I think it's for any kind of trust building in terms of what needs to be done. In order to be of trust.
I was gonna say, I had myself on mute and I was listening, but it was so many of these projects that were going through my mind where they were published. And since I've been here in Chicago, that one that was published was the Garfield Park, a new communities plan, where all that stuff from all the community and everything was said was consolidated. But to make it reader friendly, it was kind of cartoonish. Do you remember that? It was to make it like not so threatening of a document to pick up and read, you know, and because it had a lot of data in it that had been collected over the couple of years they were doing the data collection. But it was, when you got it, the map was like this little, you know, Fine Freddy map or something, you know, that described the neighborhood and did, you know, so I still have that publication. And again, it doesn't look as threatening. And then they had photographs, of course, the community that's in them, and when they're out there documenting everything in those processes. But what, and there's a couple of design projects I would show up to, and people were doing the Post-it notes, and they're, you know, making it a community day where you're on the sidewalk and everybody's engaged in, you know, what this community would look like in terms of placemaking, you know, and the evaluations. But it was just that day. And then you come back maybe a year or so later, then the project is happening. This one project I wanted to share real quickly, and it's a project that I was part of, and this is where it is now. Let me see, where's my screen share? I cannot start screen share while the other participant is sharing, okay. Just real quickly, I wanted to show you where this project is. And this is a project, I have a mural at over here at the Overton Elementary School that was closed down. And this architect, Fiala Aguilar, she got the keys to this project, and the project was bought by a developer, you know, and he wanted this to become part of the community. So over the last 5 years, this program has grown to the point where they were awarded $250,000 recently. And it was this whole process of, one of the things, one of my co-curators or people that come through the Phantom said, how did this white girl get the keys to a closed school in an African-American community? And the school was one of the feeder schools for like the, you know, housing projects and, well, the neighborhood too, but a lot of their students came from the housing projects that went there. And when they closed down and tore down those housing projects on State Street, a lot of the schools in that area that were feeder schools were closed down. And this school closed down in 2007. And I had did a mural in that school with one of the summer programs. So that's how I'm still connected kind of to the school. So different organizations have went into the school to try to vision what the school would look like. And they were doing it one room at a time. And then they would have community day, bring people over, you know, it started expanding, you know, we're getting feedback, you know, and I don't have a picture of the current campus, but it is a socially engaged, community engaged space that's been designed by community. but with Paola got the keys to it, and she went into it, and then it became a bigger process when she got the School of the Art Institute involved, started teaching her class there. You know, other artists came. The Architectural Biennale shows up. They started showcasing this school. I mean, I'm a part of the documentation and everything, I'm only saying, but here it is in 2022, and she receives this huge award for going in and developing this project. And she had to get the trust of the community in order to do this whole project, you know, and without the trust of the community, and first of all, the stakeholders that were in the community were artists that came in, you know, to the community and decided to do this big project. And it had sustainability because it's been bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm just applauding her right now for the perseverance and the work that she's done in order to receive a, you know, the prize like this from this foundation. You know, but again, it was part of this whole community process that she went through to, and every stage of the way, there was types of evaluations because it had to be collected, and she's a data collecting type person, you know what I mean? And she, you know, and methodically, you know, took the 45 school closures, made sure that she had even assessments for those schools and people that went to those schools, stories about people that went to those schools, even in the installations within Overton School. You know, they were all data driven with organizations that came in to do the installations, but they brought community people from around there and engaged them, you know, instead of it being like a, you know, School of the Art Institute or the architect doing this in the community, bringing all these people from outside the community. But she made sure that it was that community engagement piece that was effective here.
Was she invited by the brother who bought the school?
Yeah, you know, she showed up with part of, you know, Fiester's team of architects, you know, and designers, you know, and involved the stakeholders, you know, like University of Chicago, Rebuild. I was over there representing the Brownsville Art District, the Phantom Gallery, you know what I mean, at the table, and then other artists that were architects, stakeholders, you know, came over and formed like the advisory committee. And that was it. It was very important. And now the money to seed that school is coming from 2 productions. Those productions are Chicago PD. They use the school, you know, as a place that the characters drop off their adopted daughter, you know, so the project gets money, you know, for them going in, renovating and doing different things. And it's amazing because the architect, you know, and the owner that bought it, he sits back. I mean, he brings money into it and invests into it, but he's sitting back, letting it envision itself, the whole campus, and turning it into this art happening, you know, that services the community. And it wasn't like, it's not top heavy, you know, it's kind of building from the base. I'm not gonna say the bottom, but the base, in those empty rooms that were closed down and artists working in there with no heat in the winter. And you know, it's cold and it's damp and it's hot in the summer because there's no infrastructure like that. And another program that shoots the set out of there is Chicago 61st Street, you know, is a new series that's on I guess the Stars TV. And that brings money into it as well. There's murals. It's just turned into this whole non-traditional way of turning a school into not the development end, because the developer could have just did that and then invited the community in and charged them all this money. But instead he started it on this level, you know, and so it's a place that has been through all of this evaluation, through all these surveys, but they weren't the kind of surveys that were in your face surveys, you know, with data. It was about, you know, a quantitative and giving, you know, answers, you know, talking, the conversations, the case studies, you know, that each of the artists brought in because they had to put full proposals before going in there, they had to really say what they're gonna do, and it's a full proposal, and that's how she was able to collect the data and then have it all on the website, so that when you start going and reaching for the $250,000 to fund your endeavors, she had kind of laid it out really well, and it's all kind of pulled itself together. I think I have bigger ones, but that was one where, like I said, I started with a mural in there and it closed down, and I didn't even know if things still was in there. And now the owner has a mural from me that is in his collection right at the school. And then so I can start at 2007 to where we are in May of 22 with this closed school and how it reinvented itself and dealt with community, got community engagement, and all the other pieces kind of fell in. So that was kind of my story to share. Lisa, you're talking. I'm finished.
I just said, thank you. I cut it off because sometimes they're trimming, the guy was here trimming hedges. And you could hear them.
So that was my, example.
Okay. Well, I've sort of closed it out with, just the elements of trust. And so just curious as to what you all want to discuss, what would be of